As is typical of these things, I had my notes all in this, but we're not trusting the lecture and my phone is not connecting, so I'm just going to make it as I go along. Hopefully we'll be fine. So yeah, as you already know, my name is Alan Gardner. I work for this company Cultivate, or at least I do now. Why am I talking about remote working if I currently work in an office? Well, I have been working remotely on and off for about 4 years now. 2011 was my first remote job, which at the time was just, yes, I get to work from home, but I have to commute. I was spending like 2 hours a day commuting at the time. I was working for an oil company, which was soul destroying enough. So now I've done all types of remote work. First was a fully distributed team, so everybody was working remotely. We had occasional meetups, but we all basically worked in our own offices, bedrooms, cafes, whatever. I've also worked as part of a wider team. When we were in Neo, we had offices all around the world, so it was quite often it would be a case of you were working as a pair of developers in the UK, and there was another bunch of developers working in Uruguay or Singapore or somewhere. So we did that style. I also have been in the situation where I was the only remote developer, and everybody else was based in an office in Ohio, which wasn't great because they kind of forgot I was there. And yeah, as just mentioned, I've just finished a stint of working by myself, for myself, in Code for Europe. Code for Europe, are you all familiar with Code for Europe? No? Code for Europe is like Code for America, which you may not be familiar with either. The concept was basically that you had all of these people sitting in San Francisco, in the Valley, that knew how to do lots of cool things with software. And there were people in Washington who were spending billions of pounds on software that either never got delivered or didn't work, or they were basically kind of fleeced by certain companies who would remain nameless. So the idea was that you would take some startup kids from San Francisco and put them into local governments or in the country, and they would help the government to write better software and to improve the software processes. So we did the same thing here. Code for Europe was all over Europe, but the particular batch that I was working with was a project known as Open Data Scotland. So there were developers in Aberdeen, Clackmannanshire, East Lothian, and myself in Edinburgh. And our task was to help the local authorities to free up their data. I ended up creating something called Edinburgh Collected, which crowdsources memories from around Edinburgh and allows that to be used as geo-tagged media by developers and stuff. So that was cool. It was a really interesting thing. The key thing here is I was working by myself. There was no other company involved. It was my own company, and I was working for myself, my own company. So there was lots of stresses involved in both of those things, and I'll touch on those as we go. So. We'll fire ahead, we'll come in. So why would you want to work remotely? Does anybody in the room just now work remotely? I know at least one person does. 1, 2, 3, Andrew does as well, 4. Okay, grand. So working remotely is one of these things that either you want to do or you don't want to do. I tend to find there doesn't seem to be a split down the middle where someone says, I can take it or leave it. You either are like, yeah, the opportunity to work from home, no trousers, excellent, fantastic, I'll do that. Or, well, no, I would get a little money sitting in my house, why would I want to do that when I can go to an office? So, some reasons you would want to do it. Would short commute. Hello? I've only just started, you've not really missed much. My name's Alan, I used to work remotely. I'm currently working for a company called Cultivate. Right, so yes, so the pros of working at home: short commute, you get to code sitting next to your dog on the couch, or as I did in a converted airing cupboard. It was about that, big enough for me in the computer. You can work from anywhere though, you don't have to work from home. You can work in a co-located area, you can work in a coffee shop, you can work on the beach, which supposedly is the dream. This is a digital nomad thing, right, where you basically take your computer and you go off around the world and you can code from anywhere as long as you've got a network connection. It'll be slow. So the whole kind of, the reality though of the remote working is that you can actually do a job that's maybe based in, say, San Francisco or Singapore or something like that, and you don't actually have to be in that office. So it massively widens the amount of jobs that you can work on, or the amount of things that you can do. So that's the kind of pro there. Flexible hours. I will be showing gratuitous pictures of my kids because they're very cute. So flexible hours. The great thing about working remotely is that providing you're working for a company or you're working on your own, but if you're working for a company, you're working with a company that either is outside of your time zone or allows flexible hours anyway. If it happens to be a sunny day in the middle of April, which is almost unheard of, you can go outside and play with the kids for a couple of hours, as long as you go make that time up later on. So that's very handy. Also handy for doing nursery runs and being there for your dog when it's sick and various other things. Have the office you want. This is not my cupboard. I wish this was my cupboard. So yeah, basically, I don't really know what is possible there.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
Yeah, or not at all. Yeah, so you can work in the editor you want, with the tooling you want, in your own operating system. You're not stuck in a client's office working with Windows Vista and using Notepad++ or something along those lines. You can basically have your own setup, which has its pros and cons, I'm sure. But I'm going to treat that as a pro. So why doesn't everybody do it? Well, for a start, not everybody has the option to do it. Quite often, people who are, companies will not want people working from home because of some of the cons that I'm about to mention shortly. But on top of that, if you do have the opportunity to work from home, or you have the ability to go and get a job and you can do that, so you might not want to do that, and why not? Well, distractions. Although kids are great, kids are great? Kids can be great, can't they? Yeah, something like that. Let's pretend kids can be great. Yeah, but they're distracting. Your dog wanting out is distracting. Daytime television is distracting. Grand Theft Auto 5 coming out on the PC is distracting. Lots of different things can take you away from working. And if you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, or you're not sitting in an office at the time, it's kind of hard from time to time not to just get into that. Related is overworking or underworking. Underworking, obviously, if you get distracted, you decide to take a couple hours off and you don't pay those couple hours back, eventually you start falling behind. Overworking is something which is weird. You don't think you will actually do it, but you do. You're stuck into a problem and it's 6 o'clock at night, you should probably turn the PC off and go through. But actually, you're like, oh, I'll just get this solved, or it's like 8 o'clock at night and you suddenly think, oh, I know how to fix that now, and then you're back through working again. Or you wake up at 3 in the morning because you've got a deadline and you're like, I'm just going to get up now and carry on working. And before you know it, overworking, underworking becomes a cycle. You overwork so much that you end up underworking for a while, or you underwork and then you have to overwork to catch up. Lack of human contact. Lack of human contact is a weird one because I don't know about the kind of array of people in the room, but they have the spectrum of extrovert, introvert. So whether you gain energy from being with people or whether you gain energy from not being with people, basically being on your own. Everybody's somewhere on that spectrum. If you're more towards the extrovert side of that, then you may find working at home harder because of the fact you won't be in with people, you'll be on your own a lot more. If you're on the introvert side of it, which developers quite often are, I know I am, then you can end up thinking that this is a good thing to start off with, but as I'll come into a bit later, lack of human contact is one of these subtle things that you don't realise it's affecting you until it actually has. Cabin fever, stir treasonous and all that kind of thing. So anyway, remote working, I'm sure we all are kind of reasonably familiar with what that entails and what the pros and cons could be. I want to talk about mental health issues as regards remote working. I know you've had a talk already, maybe about a year ago, about stress. I think you did. Yes, yeah, it was a great talk today. It was really good. Stress, I'm going to touch on in this, but no, it's not really the main focus. So yeah, mental health. We all have mental health. It's a bit obvious to say that, but it's something. It's good to state it. Mental health, like physical health, can be good, can be bad, depending on where you're at. So what I'm talking about tonight is not necessarily things that are going to affect long-term mental illness, although obviously they will as well. But this can be things that can affect you just briefly. It can be something which gives you symptoms of a mental illness very, very briefly, or maybe on a couple of occasions, or maybe even triggers something which is late. So, a personal note, I should probably mention this to start off with. And it's not really a big thing, but I was diagnosed a couple of years ago as having a condition called cyclothymia, which is on the bipolar spectrum. Luckily, it's on the mild end. So, overworking, underworking was pretty much my life for quite a while. And yeah, it's absolutely brilliant when I'm hyper. It's fantastic. I get a lot of work done, but then I burn myself out, and it's horrible. It's very common to have illnesses like that, or either bipolar or unipolar, which is another word for depression as well. And it seems to be quite prevalent within the developer community. Small plug, I'm going to be doing, and I'm currently doing research for a talk based on that, so if you've got any information that you think might be helpful towards that, please do come and talk to me afterwards, because it'd be great to have more data points. So the only reason I mentioned this particular side of it is that this is why it's become kind of more interesting to me. This is why I've been looking more into this. So, the subtle triggers of remote working. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a bitch at the best of times, it really is. And you don't have to have any kind of latent mental illness to have this. Imposter syndrome is basically when you think that people think that you're better than you actually are. So you think that they think that you're capable of doing your job, but you know you're absolutely not capable of doing your job. In fact, you haven't got a clue what you're doing. You've been writing the same piece of code for 4 hours. Everybody else would have this done in 5 minutes. It's something that kind of affects you quite often, even if you're working in an office. But if you're working on your own at home, you can't read people's reactions. You don't know what your boss is currently thinking. So you're catastrophizing in your head. I've taken 4 hours to do this simple piece of code. This person that's my boss thinks I'm not able to do this. And it starts off a cycle that spins, and it can end up in depression. It can certainly end up with anxiety. The other side of imposter syndrome as well, actually, is when you're not working alongside people, you don't know how efficient or productive the rest of the people on your team are. Now, you can see pull requests coming in or using Git or something along those lines. But generally, you don't have a yardstick to measure against, which of course immediately, well, depending on the type of person you are, but if you're prone to negative thinking, then it can start to spiral. Negative thinking. Negative thinking is related to imposter syndrome and the fact that imposter syndrome is a negative way of thinking. But the negative thinking I'm talking about here is actually more along the lines of you immediately assume that everybody on the team is thinking bad thoughts about you. You know, it's like, oh, I haven't met my quota this week, or I put that pull request in and I got like 4 or 5 bad comments, or comments on code that I've done, or I've not written enough tests for this, or everybody else who does this, just basically catastrophizing about all sorts of things. It can also even be the case of they don't. My boss thinks I'm skiving. I'm not. I've been doing all this work for a long time, but they think I'm skiving. Disrupted circadian rhythm. This is a really subtle thing, and it's something that I only have become kind of aware of now that I'm aware I have bipolar issues. Circadian rhythm. Is everybody familiar with the circadian rhythm? Circadian rhythm is basically what happens to you through the day. It's your body clock, it's you eating in certain times, it's your sleep pattern, etc. That's probably not a technical explanation. I would use that in an exam. So the way that this affects you when you're remote working is kind of subtle as well, because it can be something as simple as you've been working away on something, you've been coding away, and all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you realise you haven't had lunch. That's kind of simple. If you get really stuck into your work and then all of a sudden you realise it's 9 o'clock at night, and not only have you not stopped, but you've not eaten your lunch and you've not eaten your tea, there's a chance that you might be manic at that point. That might not be, might just be deadline. So the circadian rhythm is really important. Remember to eat on time if you're working from home. Actually stop and take meals. Don't take your meals back into, I was about to say back into your cupboard. You don't know where. Don't take your meal into your office or wherever it is that you are. Or if you're out in a co-working area or something, do stop and actually take lunch. It is really important. And do stop on time as well. Do not work into the night, because working on a computer has a blue light coming out of it. It will make your sleep pattern, it affects your sleep pattern. You can get various things that will tone that down. Flux, I think, is one of the apps you can get for Macs, for instance. But yeah, I mean, even the fact that you're just left braining the whole way into your sleep means that you're not going to get healthy sleep. You don't get some good. Apparently, it affects your right brain dream cycle, dream thing. Yeah, wish I had minutes. So anyway, it's really important. Also, if you wake up at 3 in the morning because you're stressed about a deadline you have to get up for, don't get up and go and start working on it, because you will definitely burn yourself out. This is not a mental health thing per se. This is, in fact, it's a stress reaction. It's you giving into stress and getting up and trying to get work done because you think, oh, I'll be able to go to sleep like in the afternoon. I'll take a nap in the afternoon. It never ends up happening. You never pay it back. Burnout. Burnout's a really big thing in our industry. It's seen as a startup culture thing, but it's not just startups at all. I personally burn out working for a big oil company before. Burnout is when you don't do anything with your life apart from working. You're not regularly sleeping, you're not eating, you're not whatever. You basically just work yourself out from there. Burnout can be subtle in the fact that it just disrupts your sleep pattern and you're a bit numbed for a couple of days. It can be devastating in the fact that you actually have a full-scale mental collapse. It all depends on how far you pushed yourself and what other situations are in your environment, and in fact your mental health overall anyway. But burnout is subtle. Burnout you will not notice until it happens. It's like if you're running a marathon. Sorry, I'm told it's like if you're running a marathon. I don't run at all. But you know, if you push yourself beyond the point of your body being able to cope with it, then you will suffer for it. That's a really terrible explanation, but let's just go with that. Lack of human contact. So this is back to what we were saying earlier. Lack of human contact is a weird thing because, especially if you're an introvert, you don't really notice that anything's happening. And you will actually start to talk to yourself. It happens. You'll be wandering around the house and you'll start to realise you're actually talking to yourself because you haven't talked to anybody else for a while. Or you'll be sitting watching the TV and you'll actually get really involved. Well, this is the way it affects me anyway. I feel like I'm actually properly involved in the programme that's on. I remember watching the whole of the first series of 24 back to back over 18 hours. That was a very surreal experience. Don't recommend it. So anyway, yeah, if you're working remotely, especially if you don't live with flatmates or family or whatever, do try and actually get out and talk to people, because lack of human contact, it really does affect you. Things that I have found that can help. There's a not very concise sentence. Self-discipline. Bruce Lee, Lee. Self-discipline is probably the most obvious one, but also the hardest. If you are going to work remotely, start at a particular time in the morning, finish at a particular time at night, take regular meals. Dress before you go into the office or the cupboard, whatever it is. It's very easy to sit there in your dressing gown all day. I've done it before. I'll probably do it again. But it doesn't. If you slouch into the office and then you slouch back out, there's no reason for you to feel disciplined at that point. There's no reason for you to go, oh, okay, I'll stop now. More often than not, it puts you in a particular mindset. This is not rules, by the way. This is totally guidelines. As I say, I do tend to, when I'm working remotely, start at 8 in the morning and finish at 6 at night, and I'll have an hour for my lunch. But sometimes I'll work with the kids, sometimes it'll be something else, sometimes I'll work late if I've got a deadline, sometimes these things have to happen. But the more control you have at the time, the more you look after yourself, then when you have to go through those crunch periods or whatever, then you'll be better, or maybe not so bad. Virtual office. This kind of technology is a total godsend. I don't think I would actually work remotely if it wasn't for the fact that you can do this now. So whether it's HipChat or Slack, which everybody seems to be using now, Campfire, IRC, whatever it is you use, if you're working for an office, especially if you're a fully distributed team, you should all be in that room at all times. Yeah, because then you're basically just working in an office. You're not sitting actually physically next to somebody, but you might as well be for all the chat that's going on. And have a banter room as well, because there's nothing worse than having a project room that's full of animated GIFs. Happens. So yeah, and the virtual office thing is important not just for the actual office or the project that you're on. For the last year, I've been part of Edinburgh Remote's Slack channel. So everybody in Edinburgh that was working remotely was on the Slack channel. So even if you didn't have a company you're working with, you could just chat to folk, and we would meet up for lunch every so often and do various other things. So that has been really good, and in fact is one of the reasons I've not been on Twitter so much. Twitter is a massive ball of distraction. Yeah, it's like 1 minute you'll be on there and you're like, I'll just check and see how my mates are doing, and next thing you know, you spent 2 hours on Hacker News arguing with somebody about something completely irrelevant and unimportant. I don't Hacker News now either. I have a really interesting blog post which I've not published yet, which I talk about when I came off Hacker News, and it was basically like quitting cigarettes, as the analogy goes. Anyway, that's for another thing. Take time for yourself. If you're always working, you're always talking to other people, and when you're not working, you're with your family and with everything, it all kind of heaps up, especially if you're an introvert. Take time for yourself. This is really important, especially if you have a mood disorder, or if you're suffering from depression or anxiety or anything along those lines. Make sure you take time for yourself. It doesn't have to be meditating. Mindfulness is very good. I fully recommend it. But just go for a walk. You've got a dog, take the dog for a walk. Go out to the shops. Just do something that you want to do, even if it's playing games or reading a book or going out and taking photos or something along those lines. Take time for others. It's really easy when you're working remotely to think that you're spending time with your family because you're in the same building as them all the time, but if you're not actually spending quality time with them, you're not really spending time with them. And it does affect you as well. It's the same with not spending time with other people. You can go, and certainly it's been 3 months and you've not really spoken to your kids or find out what they're doing and all the rest of it. And it's important that you do that. And if you don't have kids, don't spend time with other people's kids. That's wrong. Definitely go meet your friends, go and do stuff with your family, wherever. Get out of the house. One point when I was working 2011, realised that I hadn't left the house in over a fortnight. Hadn't left the house at all. I mean, outside, hadn't been to the shops or whatever, and hadn't been beyond the bounds of like my garden wall in almost a month. So I'd been out there, done stuff in the garden, like taking the rubbish out, cleaned up after the dog or whatever. But it's actually really easily done. If all of your friends are online and you're speaking to them, your hobby is gaming, you spend most of your time coding or working or whatever, there's no reason for you to leave the house. And it feels great at the start because you don't have to leave the house, you don't have to go out and deal with the general public people. I was living in Aberdeen at the time, it wasn't really that much to do actually with the house anyway. It is really important to actually get out and to do things that don't involve sitting in front of the computer. Support network. I have used a slightly funny image for this, but support network isn't. It's not a serious thing, but it's an important thing. If you do have a mental health issue, if you do have, in fact, even if you don't, if you have the situation where you're working remotely and you don't get to actually see people and talk through what the issues are of working remotely, then it can kind of get you down. So it's important. Like I said, the Edinburgh Remote Slack channel has been really helpful for me personally. I think it's a really good thing. Meeting up with people every now and again, you understand what you're going through. But I haven't left the house in a fortnight. Really? I haven't left the house in 3 weeks. Can we have a pissing contest? It's great. But yeah, even if it comes down to the fact of actually going and finding people who are having the same mental health issues as you are. I know I've kind of glossed over the mental health aspect a little bit, and the reason I have is because I don't want people to think that mental health, you have to have a mental illness in order to have a mental health issue. You don't. Stress is a mental health issue. Depression is a mental health issue that can be, you've been depressed for maybe 2 weeks or something and then it never happens again in your entire life, and that's fine. But it's kind of similar. Like you can have physical illnesses, you can have a cold for a couple of weeks and then it goes, or a chest infection. Or you can have diabetes and it's something you have to manage throughout your life, and it doesn't define your life. You have diabetes rather than you are a diabetic, if that can make sense. And it's exactly the same with a mental health issue as well. So, oops, that's backwards. So, some resources, if you are interested. This is not a full list by any means, manner, or form. And the stuff that I've talked about tonight as well is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's stuff that I've missed. That doesn't work on the TV. So, DevPress, this is a really good forum. It was started off by a guy called Greg Bags. I don't know.
It's too late. It's too late. You've committed yourself.
I know. Sorry, Greg. I've totally forgotten your last name. But yeah, he started this off in reaction to a talk that he did around these sort of things at Ruby conferences. So basically, people who are having mental health issues, people either with long-term mental illnesses or actually just with something that's happening there and then, and quite often people just going, I'm totally out of my depth. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's a really good forum to go to talk to you about that. Mindfulness is everybody familiar with mindfulness? Do you know what mindfulness is? It's a secular meditation, so it's not tied into any kind of religion, and it basically just teaches you to be present, to notice what's going on around about you and stop worrying about the future. Just think about what's happening now. It's quite an easy technique. There's various apps for the iPhone, there's Headspace and Beautify and various other things as well. So it's quite an easy thing to get into. And the NHS has a page on mindfulness as well. I actually meant to just link to the stress, anxiety, depression page there, though. It's got lots of resources and it's very handy. Stress, anxiety and depression are the most common mental illnesses that occur, most common that you will have. The most common that you may have once and never have again, or have a period of having them and never have them again. And if you do fancy working remotely, weworkremotely.com is a great place to go find a remote job. So there we go. Thank you very much.